I am making some improvements to Cold Comfort for this weekend, and one of those changes is adding more cards to the city deck. So everybody liked the special buildings in the game, but we all felt last weekend like there were too many of them, and that means either adding more common cards or taking out some of the special buildings. I don't know which ones to cut, so I've just got to add more common cards, and that'll give me more cards to play with when I tune down the final deck. So I'm going to make these tiles with labels on heavy cardstock, and I print them 8 up on a full sheet and then cut them down after they are stuck on the cardstock. These are super cheap labels, and so they are not divided on the backing, but it's still nice to have a partial sticky part. It helps me align page, stick down part of it, and then I can peel off the rest. The trouble with tearing it off is it's never straight, and so I have to be a little lucky with the second half. Oh, I got it. You can pretty much use any heavy cardstock for this job. A cereal box works really good. The coated side of that cardboard sticks to the label sheets better than the uncoated side. I'm using the slicker side of this cardstock to adhere the labels also. Well, it's not a perfect cut, but it's close. It's certainly close enough for this job. And these cards are hard to shuffle no matter how well cut they are. Now I am ready to add them into the deck and play again.
I just play out. So just go somewhere. One there, and the other 2 stay on the boat.
I want to talk a little more about Cold Comfort, specifically the tiles and the evolution of the public buildings. The game has always been about building a Western town, and I like when the town builds sort of organically, but it's bad for the game if big clusters form, if great big neighborhoods form. And we've had a lot of rules over the course of development of this game about how to keep those big blocks from forming. I want to let people play cards where they want to, but at the same time, I want to keep them from like merging every neighborhood into one giant neighborhood and then battling over that, because I think it's more fun to have discrete neighborhoods that are each worth less points. Since the beginning of the game, the cards have had these walls, these street curbs basically on some sides that said, okay, you can't abut cards here. You can attach them on their non-street sides, but you can't attach them on their street sides. And that sort of gave players leeway to make neighborhoods insulated if they wanted to. But there was also the possibility that people would want to sort of build these big jumbles, and we didn't like the jumbles. I didn't like the jumbles. So one of the things we tried was I imported a rule from Copper Creek, and Copper Creek is a really similar game. It's about building a Western town, but it just sort of shows that you can't pick a mechanic, even from a really similar game, and transplant it and hope that it's going to do the same job in this one. In Copper Creek, there's front and main streets. When you set up the initial map, there's just this T shape that goes on forever, and you cannot cross those streets. And that means there's at least 3 discrete blocks. But the rules of Copper Creek are different. The neighborhoods don't matter in the same way that they do in Cold Comfort, and the cards also have little street parts on them as well. So it's a whole different game, even though it looks really similar, and that T-shaped street was not a perfect solution for Cold Comfort. In the meantime, we were developing the public buildings, and so there's another sort of thread that comes into the current rule. A public building is defined as the sort of pre-built structure that's on the card. In some drafts, those were just vacant lots where you had to actually pay money to build the structure, but in a lot of builds, they just sort of emerge and they are there. And for a while, they gave you access to certain special abilities. In the current build, they put new characters into play, and those characters are either good or bad or accessible through checking them into your hotel, or just they screw up a neighborhood when they're in it. They all work in different ways, but the idea that those characters have behaviors is a really fun way to implement these public buildings. And so every one of the public buildings brings a different kind of character into play. And they were also worth extra points for the neighborhood. A big amalgamated neighborhood with lots of public buildings was worth a whole bunch of points. So often in game design, you will find 2 problems that don't seem related, but they have a solution that sort of fixes them both. You take, if you have one problem, just set it aside. and wait for another problem to show up, seemingly an unrelated problem, and you may find a solution that fixes them both. In this case, I think we did have one major problem, which was how to prevent large neighborhoods from forming. We didn't have like a contrapositive in this case. We didn't have another unrelated problem, but there were a lot of little things that were happening, like the rules about streets and the invisible forever streets were hard to remember. Any other laws about how to build the town seemed like extra rules that didn't seem necessary. A big setup ahead of time was not working out very well, and we can't just tell people, hey, cut it out, don't build a giant neighborhood, it's bad for the game. So I think the only sort of related thing that brought the idea to mind was that people would nickname neighborhoods after the public buildings that were in them. So that's got the jail, that's the jail neighborhood. And that sort of, I think, is what made it click for me. Maybe it would work if each neighborhood was only allowed to have one public building, and that does exactly what I want. It keeps the neighborhoods from getting too big. If you draw a power card, if you draw a card with a new public building on it, you can't just smash it onto a big neighborhood that you already control. You got to start a new neighborhood or help one that isn't very well developed. It makes the world build very much the way I sort of want it to. I've got a few games abstracts, like Linush, for example, where I have a way that I want the game to look when it's done. And I don't want to say, make it look like the picture, but I want to say, these are the 3 rules you're building by, and watch as that picture just sort of emerges from those rules. And that's where we are with Cold Comfort right now. I hope you get a chance to play it. Please drop by Crab Fragment Labs and try all of our wonderful new games. Some of them are very done, and some of them are still very much not done. And we try to make it clear which is which, but we love playtest feedback on all of those. And we hope you'll enjoy playing our games. I'm James Ernest. Thanks for watching, and I will see you at the table. I am making a bunch of changes to Cold Comfort for this weekend. I kicked my trash can. Now the heat's on. Awesome.